My name is Ray Holloway. I'm 44 years old, and for the last 7 years I've been the caretaker at Birchwood, a wedding venue out where the road turns to gravel and the old oaks lean over a barn somebody's grandfather built. I'm the man you don't see. I set up the 300 white chairs before you arrive, and I stack them again after you leave. I fix the air conditioning that always dies in July, and the string lights that always blow a fuse during the first dance. I unclog the toilets, and I mop the spilled champagne, and I salt the walk when it ices over. On a Saturday in June, I'll watch 150 people cry happy tears at the most beautiful day of somebody's life. And then I'll wait in the dark by the truck until they're gone so I can take the flowers down. I don't say that for pity. It's good honest work, and it keeps me sober, and staying sober is the whole job of my life now, the one I can't afford to lose. I get to Birchwood early because an empty venue at dawn is about the most peaceful thing I know. I live alone in a rented half house in town. I go to a meeting on Tuesdays. That's my life, and it's more than I deserve, and I'd made my peace with the size of it. There's a reason a man ends up alone at the edge of other people's joy, fixing what breaks, and never part of the celebration. Mine has a name, and it's Hannah. But I'll get to that. First, let me say one thing to you, straight, because I've come to learn this story finds the people who need it most. If you're carrying something you think you waited too long to fix a person you let slip away, a door you're sure is closed for good, stay with me tonight. This one's for you. And if it reaches you, tell me in the comments where you're watching from, and subscribe to Dreamheart Stories, because we make these for the folks standing at the edge of the light. Now let me tell you about the night it started to rain. It was a Saturday in late September. A big wedding, 200 guests, the kind where the family spares no expense, and the stress comes off them in waves. I'd been on my feet since 5. The forecast had been clear all week, and then turned on us by afternoon, the sky going the color of a bruise, and by the time the guests were seated for the ceremony out under the oaks, you could smell the rain coming the way you can smell a fight before it starts. I was around the back of the barn, wrestling a tarp over the sound equipment before the sky let go, when it let go. Not a drizzle. A wall of it. All at once, the way the worst storms come. I heard the ceremony scatter, 200 people running for the barn, shrieking and laughing the way people do when the weather wrecks a plan. I figured I'd be mopping that floor till midnight. And then, over the noise of it, under the eave of the old equipment shed where I keep the mowers, I saw her. A bride. In the full dress, the whole thing, soaked through and ruined. The white gone gray and heavy with water, her veil plastered to her shoulders. She wasn't running for the barn with everyone else. She was standing alone in the dark under that eave with her back against the shed wall, and she was crying. Not pretty crying. The real kind. The kind that bends you over. The kind a person only does when they think nobody in the world is watching. I'm not a man who inserts himself. I've spent 7 years learning to stay invisible. My first instinct was to back away and leave her to it, to pretend I hadn't seen, because a bride crying alone behind the shed on her wedding day is not the caretaker's business. But the rain was coming sideways under that eave, and she was shaking. And I've stood in enough cold alone in my life to know what it does to a person. So I took off my work jacket, the dry-ish one I keep in the truck, and I walked over slow, hands where she could see them, and I held it out. "You're going to catch your death out here," I said. It's the only thing I could think of. "Put this on." She looked up at me. 25 maybe, mascara down to her chin, and she didn't take the jacket, and she didn't tell me to go away. She just looked at me like she'd been caught, and she said the thing that started all of it. "I can't go in there," she said. "I can't do it. I can't walk down that aisle." I didn't ask her why. I want you to know that. I've had enough people demand my reasons in my life to know that the kindest thing you can sometimes do is not ask. I just put the jacket over her shoulders, and I said, "All right." And I stood next to her under the eave and watched the rain come down, and I didn't say one more word. It took her a few minutes. The shaking slowed. And then, the way people do when you give them room instead of questions. She told me on her own. It wasn't the groom. She loved the groom. It wasn't cold feet, not the way people mean it. It was her father. He died 14 months ago. Cancer, the long, slow kind that gives you time to be afraid. He'd been the one thing she was sure of her whole life, the man who'd taught her to drive and walk the floor with her when she had the flu, and promised her since she was a little girl that he'd walk her down the aisle one day and try not to embarrass her by crying. And he'd held on as long as he could. But 14 months wasn't long enough, and when she'd stepped out from the barn tonight and seen that aisle, that long stretch of grass between the chairs, and known she was going to have to walk it alone, that there was no arm to take, that the most important steps of her life she'd take with the one person who promised to be there, just gone. An empty space where he should be something in her had simply broken, and her body had turned and run before her mind could stop it, out into the rain, away from all those watching faces and the unbearable kindness they'd aim at the girl with no father to give her away. "I can't walk it alone," she said. "I know that's stupid. People do it all the time. But I can't. I'd rather run away from my own wedding than walk down there by myself and have everyone watch me not have him." And I stood there in the rain, and I understood every word of it. Because I am a man who knows exactly what an empty chair costs. Here's the part of me I have to tell you about now, because the rest won't mean anything without it. I had a daughter. I have a daughter. Her name is Hannah, and she's 24 years old, and the last time I spoke to her she was 17, and she told me she never wanted to see me again. And she was right to. I was a drinker. I want to be plain about it, the way I've learned to be in those Tuesday rooms. I was a drinker all through Hannah's childhood, the kind that's there but not there, the kind that promises and forgets, the kind that makes a little girl learn not to count on him. I missed the recitals. I missed the birthdays I swore I'd make. I was drunk at her 8th grade graduation, and her mother finally had enough, and I don't blame her, and the divorce was ugly, and I kept drinking, and Hannah watched me choose the bottle over her enough times that by 17 she'd made the only sane decision and cut me out of her life clean. I got sober a year after that. Too late to be her father in any way that counted. 7 years now, one day at a time, and not a single one of those days have I gone without thinking about her. I know what she looks like only from a distance. From the times I've been too much of a coward to do anything but drive past places I thought she might be. I have a photo of her at 9 in my wallet, soft from handling. And I have never reached out. Not once, because the shame is a wall I've never found the top of. Because I'm sure I have been completely sure that I gave up the right to be her father, and the kindest thing a man like me can do is stay gone and not make her carry me anymore. So when that bride told me she couldn't bear to walk down the aisle with an empty space where her father should be, I wasn't standing next to a stranger. I was standing next to the other side of my own life. She was the daughter mourning the father who'd wanted desperately to be there. And I was the father who'd thrown away the chance she'd have given anything for. I don't fully know what came over me. I'm not a man who speaks up. But I heard myself say it. "I'm nobody," I told her. "I'm just the fellow who fixes the toilets and sets up the chairs around here. But I've stood at the edge of 200 of these, and I'll tell you something true. Your dad isn't in that empty space. Your dad is in the fact that you can't imagine doing this without him. That's not an absence. That's how much he's still here. And if the only thing standing between you and the man you love down at the other end of that aisle is that you need an arm to hold on to," she looked up at me. I held mine out. "Mine's steady," I said. "It's not the right arm. But an arm's an arm, long as it doesn't shake. And I haven't had a drink in 7 years, so this one doesn't shake anymore." She stared at me for a long moment, this soaked stranger in a ruined dress. And then she put her hand through my arm. I had a suit in my locker. I want to explain that, because it matters. It was my funeral suit, the only good clothes I owned, and I kept it at Birchwood because I'd worn it to exactly one thing in 7 years, the funeral of a man from my Tuesday meeting who had no one else to come, and I'd never bothered to take it home. Now I was glad of it. I told the bride to give me 5 minutes. I went and changed out of my wet work clothes into that black suit, and I dried my face, and I found a single white flower that had fallen off an arrangement, and I put it in the pocket. And I looked at a 44-year-old caretaker in a borrowed from the dead suit in the mirror of the staff bathroom, and I told him not to ruin this for her. The rain had eased to almost nothing. They'd moved the ceremony into the barn. 200 people packed under the string lights I'd hung that morning, and word had gone around that the bride had bolted, and the whole room had that held breath quiet of a day going wrong. Her mother was near tears at the front. The groom stood up there pale as paper, not knowing if he'd been left. And then, the doors at the back of the barn opened, and there she was. Hair still wet, dress still ruined, mascara wiped clean, chin up, on the arm of the maintenance man. I will remember the sound that room made until the day I die. It wasn't a gasp. It was a kind of exhale, 200 people letting go of a breath at once. The groom's face came apart. Her mother put both hands over her mouth, and I walked that girl down 300 chairs I had set up with my own hands that morning, slow, steady, her grip tight on my arm, and for the first time in 7 years, and maybe in my whole life, I was not invisible at a wedding. I was in it. I was the arm that got a frightened girl to the person who loved her. At the front, the groom stepped down, and I took her hand off my arm and I put it in his, the way I'd seen 100 fathers do it from the back of the room where I waited with my mop. The officiant, bless him, found his place and asked, "Who gives this woman?" And the bride looked at me. And I hadn't planned a word. What came out was, "Her father does," through whoever was lucky enough to stand in for him today. Then I went and stood at the back, by the door, in my dead friend's suit, and I watched a wedding from inside it for the first time in my life, and I cried like the invisible man I'd been, quiet, in the dark, where I thought nobody could see. I went home that night, cracked wide open. I couldn't sleep. I sat at my little kitchen table in that half-house with the rain starting up again on the window, and I did the thing I had not let myself do in 7 years. I got out a piece of paper and a pen, and I started writing a letter to Hannah. I don't know how many times I started it. The floor got covered in crossed-out beginnings. Dear Hannah, you don't have to read this. I have no right. Everything I wrote was true, and none of it was enough. But somewhere past midnight, I stopped trying to make it good, and just made it honest. I told her I was sober. 7 years. I told her I knew it was too late to be her father, and that I wasn't writing to ask for anything, not forgiveness, not a visit, not a single thing. I told her I'd walked a stranger down the aisle that day, because her own dad couldn't, and that it had made me understand something I'd been hiding from for 7 years, that the worst thing I ever did wasn't the drinking. It was deciding, all on my own, that staying gone was a gift to her, that I'd called my cowardice a kindness. I told her I thought about her every single day. I told her that if she never wanted to hear from me again, I would respect it completely, but that she deserved to know her father was alive and sober and sorry, and that he loved her, and that the empty chair at her life was a man who was still here, too ashamed to sit in it. I signed it. I folded it. I put her mother's old address on it, the one I still knew by heart. And then I didn't send it. For 9 days that letter sat on my kitchen table, and every day the old voice won. She told you never again. She meant it. You'll just open the wound. A girl who survived you doesn't need you crawling back to make yourself feel better. Leave her in peace. Staying gone is the last decent thing you can do for her. It's the same voice that used to tell me one drink wouldn't hurt. I know that voice, and I still nearly let it win, because it's wearing the mask of love when really it's just fear, and a frightened man will talk himself out of the best thing left to him every single time. The letter would still be on that table today if Sophie hadn't come back. That was the bride's name. Sophie. I'd never even gotten it that night in the rain. She showed up at Birchwood on a Tuesday, 11 days after her wedding, and asked the office who the man was that had walked her down the aisle. They pointed her out to the back lot, where I was loading chairs, and she came across the gravel in jeans this time, no veil, an ordinary young woman, and she hugged me before I could get a word out. She'd come to thank me. She said it had been the most important moment of her life, and she didn't even know my name. We sat on the tailgate of my truck and talked for the better part of an hour. She told me the marriage was good, that the groom cried every time anyone brought up the barn doors opening. And then she asked about me. Did I have kids? People always ask that, and I always say no, because it's easier. But I'd just spent 11 days with a letter on my table, and the wall had a crack in it now. And before I could stop myself, I told this girl the truth. About Hannah. About the drinking and the divorce and the 17-year-old who told me never again. About the letter I'd written and couldn't mail. Sophie listened to all of it, and when I finished, she didn't say it's not too late, or she'll understand, or any of the soft things people say. She said something that put the whole thing in the ground. She said, I would give anything I have for my dad to write me a letter. To get one more thing from him. One more word. She said, you walked me down that aisle because you knew what an empty chair costs. So, you of all people know. There's a girl out there with an empty chair, Ray, and the difference between her and me is that hers doesn't have to stay empty. Mine does. Mine's permanent. Yours is just scared. She looked at me. Don't you dare leave that letter on the table. Don't make your daughter spend her life wishing for the one thing you're too afraid to give her. I mailed it the next morning. I won't pretend it was a movie after that. Hannah didn't call. Weeks went by, and the old voice told me I'd done damage, that I should have stayed gone. Then, a little over a month later, a letter came back. 3 lines. It said she'd read it. It said she wasn't ready to see me and didn't know if she ever would be. And it said, this is the part I read 100 times, but I'm glad you're sober, and I'm glad you wrote. That was the whole door. 3 lines and a crack of light. And I did the only thing I knew how to do, the thing the Tuesday rooms had taught me. I didn't push on it. I just answered, short and honest, and asked nothing, and let her set the pace. A letter every few weeks, then every couple of weeks. Then she asked a question back, which felt like the sun coming up. Months of that. A year of that. The first time she agreed to meet me, for a coffee, in public, an hour she could leave whenever she wanted, I sat in that coffee shop 45 minutes early, shaking worse than I had in 7 years of sobriety. She came. She was guarded and grown and so much like her mother, it hurt. We talked for 2 hours. When she left, she didn't hug me, but at the door she turned around and said, "See you, Dad," and I had to sit back down. It built slow, the way real things do, the way you earn back something you broke. Dinners, then her birthday, which I got to be at for the first time in a decade. Then the day she called me on the phone, just to talk, about nothing, and I realized halfway through that this was what other men had, and threw away without knowing what they had, and that I'd thrown it away too, and somehow, impossibly, been given the chance to pick it back up. It's been 6 years since the night it rained. Hannah is 30 now. And last spring, she got married. She called me 4 months before the wedding. I figured she wanted help with something, a venue question, my line of work after all. Instead, she was quiet on the phone for a second, and then she said, "Dad, I want to ask you something, and I need you to not make it a big thing." She said, "Will you walk me down the aisle?" I had to put the phone down on the counter for a minute. I'm not ashamed to tell you that. They got married at Birchwood. She chose it. She knew what that barn was to me, what those 300 chairs were, the 7 years I'd set up other people's joy from the outside of it. She chose the one place on earth where her father had been the most invisible, so that he could be the most seen. And on a Saturday in May, in a real suit this time, one she helped me buy, I stood at the back of that barn with my daughter's hand through my arm, the same arm I'd offered a soaked stranger in the dark 6 years before, and I walked Hannah down an aisle I had walked 1,000 times alone with a mop. An arm's an arm, I told Sophie that night, long as it doesn't shake. Mine didn't shake. 7 years sober had become 13 by then. and I walked my girl steady all the way to the man who loved her, and when the officiant said, "Who gives this woman?" my daughter answered before I could. "My father does," she said. "He's late, but he's here." And the whole room, which knew at least some of our story, made that same sound the room had made for Sophie all those years before, that long exhale. The sound a room full of people make when something that was supposed to stay broken doesn't. Sophie was there, by the way. We'd stayed friends, the bride from the rain, and the man who walked her. She sat in the third row and cried through the whole thing, and afterward she found me and put her hand on my arm and said, "See?" And didn't have to say anything else. People ask me sometimes what I think I did to deserve it. My daughter back, the aisle, the second chance, the 13 years, and I tell them the truth, which is that I didn't deserve it at all, and that's exactly the point. There's no ledger that gives a man back what I threw away. I didn't earn Hannah by walking a stranger through the rain. All I did, the only thing I did, was offer my arm to a crying girl when every instinct told me to stay invisible, and then, 11 days later, find the nerve to do for my own daughter what I'd just done for a stranger. Reach out, offer the arm, sit in the empty chair instead of standing guard over it. Because here's what 20 years of being the invisible man taught me wrong, and what one night of rain taught me right. We tell ourselves that staying away is a kindness, that the people we've hurt are better off without us, that the door is closed, that it's too late, that we've forfeited the right. And sometimes that voice is wearing love's face so well we never catch that it's really just fear, talking us out of the one thing that could still save us. The empty chair at someone's life is so rarely as permanent as we've decided it is. Sometimes the only thing keeping it empty is a frightened person who's too ashamed to walk over and sit down. So if you're out there tonight, standing at the edge of somebody's life you're sure you lost for good, telling yourself the kindest thing you can do is stay gone, I want a man who believed that for 7 years to tell you that you might be wrong. I was. The door you're certain is closed might just be waiting for you to knock, scared, and sorry, and steady. You don't get to know until you offer the arm. You just have to be brave enough to hold it out, and humble enough to walk slow, and willing to wait however long it takes for a hand to reach back. Because no matter what you broke, no matter how long you've been gone, no matter how sure you are that you've forfeited your place, that chair might still be yours. A girl in a ruined wedding dress taught me that, in the rain, when I thought I was the one doing the rescuing. It turned out she walked me somewhere too,